Hi everyone. Wanted to talk a bit how my music career started and how I got going to where I am now. I jotted a few points down which I wanted to read off and just comment as I went along. So when I was about 9 years old, a friend of mine showed me his brother's guitar. And after that, I knew it was as if when I saw this instrument, something just connected me to it. And from then on, it's all I actually wanted to do. After that, I went for lessons, and before not too long, I think it was about 2 years later, I was playing in the local Catholic church. Actually, it's not the local Catholic church because it was 6 k's away, 7 k's away, and that in those days was like traveling to another city. Shows you how times have moved on. From there, I did a few things, but I was in primary school, so not much happened. Then we moved back to Italy. And when we went to Italy, it was a lot more open, so we could see and search a lot more about on TV. A lot more rock music was available to us, and something that wasn't available to us in South Africa because it was a very locked country, very controlled. Rock and roll and all that was not allowed in our country to that extent. And a band like Kiss, I had never heard of them before. We were just never exposed to that kind of stuff. When I went to Italy and I saw them on TV playing their first song that I was exposed to was a song by the name of I Was Made for Loving You. That song shook my grounding, my foundation. I was hooked. From there, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a guitarist. I wanted to be a songwriter, but that came later. And it wasn't long before I applied my trade to writing songs. It just started coming to me. It wasn't someone that came, you should try starting to write music. I just started writing songs. I knew immediately that I was a composer, songwriter. I was just writing, I think I was 12, 13 years old, alone in the bedroom. And I was exposed to so many bands. I believe that I became of age in a golden era of music. It was in the 1979-80 era. And besides that, I Was Made for Loving You. There were so many groundbreaking hits that changed music, I would believe, in those days. Michael Jackson came out with his second solo album, which was huge. Another brick in the wall from a band called Pink Floyd. Many of you might know it. We Don't Need No Education, like very rebellious. And bands like that. There were so many... Blondie, Heart of Glass. Anyone who remembers from my age group will remember. Those were all from 79, 80. It just got me so hooked on music. It's what I wanted to do. But lo and behold, then we went back to South Africa and we went back to the old way it was of doing, playing music. And even though I was in high school then, we were then exposed to new music like Foreigner. I remember The Police. It was huge bands in those days and changed music going forward. I remember the more songs that I saw, the more I wanted to play these songs and the more it drove me to learn them. The first guitar I got was at 16 years old. I only finally got to get an electric guitar. I had been playing with these nylon string acoustic guitars till then, and I was so frustrated because I could hear the effects that bands were making and I just couldn't replicate those effects on an acoustic guitar. It was like, really, I wanted to bash this guitar against the wall. How do they get these things right? And then eventually I got the electric guitar and I worked out that what Gilmour would sound like on Pink Floyd. It wasn't the exact sound, but I was getting close to it, and I thought, now I've come to a realization that I needed an amplifier with this guitar. And the more I grew in sound, the more I just wanted to expand and learn more and just discover more about the world of music. But in South Africa in those days, what you did, the done thing was, I was in a technical high school and there's no music in a technical high school, so I studied and then got graduated in civil drafting and electronics. And from there I went on and did 7 years employed in a computer company, which I pursued for 7 years, as I said. But we actually, through those times when I was about 21 years old, eventually through perseverance and persistence, we hit our first record contract. It was for the release of a single. A 7 single in those days was one song which you took off an album. We didn't have an album. The company was willing to give us a chance based on a 7 single on 2 songs. You'd have a flip side of a 7 single, one side which was called Moving On, and the other side was called Wish You Were Here. And what happened, this is just an interesting story from the old days, is in those days they would crit your music and you'd have to stand in front of a long table full of old buddies. I mean, like real geriatrics. And I'll never forget, like some of them, there was this one woman who were like looking at me scared. So I'd look at her skew back, the rebellious nature. And you'd just stand there while they'd play your single and listen to it. And you'd stand like you didn't know where to actually hide. So we just confront them. After that, you just leave and they just say, thank you very much. They'd clap for you, whether they mean it or not. And then we'd get a crit, a feedback. So the PRO woman from the record company came to us and said, listen, the song Moving On, they perceived as being against the government. And so they are banning your song. So she went back, the company went back to that board, if you want to call it that, and tell them, listen, the actual song is not about against the government, but more about it was about a drug trip. To which they said, oh no, then that's fine. Imagine how screwed up our country was for real. It's fine to have a song about a drug trip, but you'd be banned for going up against the government. Be it as it may, it was like funny. Those were other days. From there, there was no way out. I'd have to move to the USA to further a career in rock and roll. And I realized very, very quickly after that, I was going nowhere. The record sales in those days were not bad because we were doing 1,000, we sold 1,000 units. And they told us that was pretty good. So be it as it may, compared to the millions today they sell, it was actually nothing. But, we had a bite at the cherry. From there, I went into I studied electronics and that, so I got employed as a computer engineer, which meant repairing mainframes for a computer company. But the music didn't die inside of me. It like surfaced again, time and time again. So what I decided to do eventually, I built my own music studio. I just went for it and got a loan and went and built a music studio because the passion just kept coming out of me. Before I knew it, I was doing music for the gospel industry because my life changed, and then but my influences were still strong in the AC/DC. Billy Idol was a huge, when he came out with his first real hit, I'd say. Dancing with Myself wasn't really, it did, but didn't do that as well as White Wedding. When I heard White Wedding, I thought, what on earth is that sound? It just made me want to play more and more. But those were still my influences. So even though I was in the gospel industry, that's what I wanted to play. But lo and behold, as I got more into the gospel industry for playing music, I remember a good friend of mine was doing guitar lessons on a gospel channel on TV in those days, and he started playing what they used to call hammer-ons. It's what Eddie Van Halen brought into light, invented really, let's say, he made it famous. And he was teaching people how you would do hammer-ons, but it was on a gospel program, so people complained and they shut him down. Imagine that. So very difficult to do what I wanted to do. Billy Idol, imagine, in the gospel industry, it wasn't going to go down very well. But eventually, because it surfaced, I used that to go out and actually evangelize in schools and wherever I went and captivate people by playing this hard, launching guitar. And because music by that time had changed and it was a lot more about mosh pits and all that, there were times when we used to go into high schools, I remember we had to stop playing because the mosh pit grew so violent that people were going to start getting hurt. Anyway, that's just a light note. But I carried on, and since then I decided I was going to release my own records on a solo album, and that's what I did. I carried on recording albums and releasing them myself to this day. And till now, I've been pursuing my own career in music, but for a gospel industry for a very different reason, and which I'm pursuing till now. Now I'm much more into the production industry, and that's what I do. I write a lot more on the production side of issues. But why I wanted to bring this up, I remember I'm grateful because I found my meaning in life. I didn't stay where I was, and I had the courage to actually go through with my inner calling and pursue what I had been created to do, and that's the music. It always won. And I remember one of my mentors, he's a pastor, and he has a very, very big international ministry. And he said that imagine climbing the ladder to your success or your vision, only to find out one day later in your life, much later, that the ladder was on the wrong wall. I've never been shocked by a statement more than that, because this man is not just a man that goes around in the corporate industry dealing in business. It's a person who's involved in people's insurance, life insurance, if you will. And he speaks to a lot of people, and that's what he saw, was that a lot of people had regrets. And I'm so grateful for that.